Co-powered by only OLX Autos gives the best price for your car. Co-powered by NetMeds, India की अपनी pharmacy.
Tonight at 9 p.m. on the news today with me, Rajdeep Sardesai. As the Quad country leaders come together in Tokyo, the big question, can the United States, India, Australia, Japan effectively tackle the growing influence of China in the Indo-Pacific? That's going to be a big talking point on the news today. Also, the Aam Aadmi Party government in Punjab sacks its health minister over corruption charges. Is the AAP walking the talk? All that and much more on the news today. News without the noise.
Presented by Aditya Birla Group, Big in Your Life. Co-presented by Star Health Insurance, the health insurance specialist. Co-presented by JK Pancharghat Tire. Ab hawa nahi niklegi. Powered by NECC. Sunday ho ya Monday, roz khao ande. Co-powered by Dish HD, Cricket Castly partner.
Good evening, hello and welcome. You're with the news today, your primetime destination news, newsmakers, talking points. The big talking point is coming from Tokyo, where India, United States, Australia, Japan, the Quad have come together. But can they contain the rising power of China? Top experts from Beijing, from New Delhi and from Washington will join us. Also, the Aam Aadmi Party has bitten the bullet. They've sacked a minister for alleged corruption. We'll have more on that too. But first, as always, the 9 headlines at 9. The Quad countries put up a united front against Chinese expansionism in Tokyo. US President Joe Biden praises India's COVID management, but the joint statement doesn't name China or Russia, sticks instead to the Indo-Pacific. Varanasi court fixes Thursday now for the next Gyanvapi hearing to decide on the maintainability of the Hindu side's plea. Wazu Khana to remain sealed, but namaz will continue. A Gyanvapi rerun now in Pune after the MNS claims 2 dargahs built on Puneshwar's temple land. Party launches Free the Temple Land campaign in Maharashtra. Delhi court will give an order in the Qutub Minar case now on June 9th. Hindu side wants restoration of deities. ASI says no proof. If relics are in their original spot or brought from outside, says there is no need for the Qutub Minar to be part of this debate. Terrorists kill a policeman in Srinagar. Daughter who clung to the cop during the attack is also shot at by the terrorist. 7-year-old rushed to the hospital. Rahul Gandhi's meeting with UK Labour MP Jeremy Corbyn creates a political controversy. The BJP attacks them. Congress hits back by uploading a picture of the Prime Minister with Corbyn, who was known for making comments on human rights violations in India. Punjab Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann sacks Health Minister Dr. Vijay Sangla on charges of corruption for allegedly seeking 1% cut for tender approvals. Arvind Kejriwal says the AAP is walking the talk on corruption. Another choppy session on Dalal Street. Sensex drops over 200 points. Nifty slips below 16,150. Broader markets underperform. And Bitcoin price falls below $30,000. Second largest cryptocurrency, Ethereum, falls below $2,000. Major cryptocurrencies are in the red. But first to the breaking news that's coming in this evening. Terrorists have shot dead a policeman. Saifullah Qadri has been shot dead in Srinagar. The policeman's 7-year-old daughter has also been injured in the attack. The terrorist group, the Resistance Front, has claimed responsibility for this terrible attack that's taken place in Srinagar a short while ago. According to police sources, the 7-year-old daughter of the policeman ran to save her father when he was targeted. The girl was also then shot at. The condition of the girl is now stable, although she suffered heavy blood loss. So that's the latest unfortunate incident involving terror in the Kashmir Valley that's taken place. That's the story that's breaking at the moment. Terrorist shooting a JNK cop dead in Srinagar. Remember, terrorists in recent weeks have tried to step up their attacks, targeted killings in particular on different specific groups, including this time on a police officer and even more tragically on his 7-year-old daughter. The TRF, that group in Kashmir, has claimed responsibility for it. We'll have more on that later, but let's turn to our big top story today. Prime Minister Narendra Modi and leaders of the United States, Japan and Australia were in Tokyo today for the second in-person meeting of the Quad leaders. They exchanged views about what's happening in the Indo-Pacific region, global issues of mutual interest. But while the group is being seen to try and contain China, the Quad joint statement stayed away from taking on either China or, importantly, even Russia in the context of the Ukraine invasion. So what does this meeting mean, and what will India's role really be in Quad? And importantly, can this new grouping contain Chinese expansionism? That's our top focus today. But first, take a look at this story from my colleague Paulo Misaha, who is in Tokyo.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi, US President Joe Biden, Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese put up a united front against any kind of expansionism in the second in-person meeting of the Quad leadership. US President Joe Biden pitched the alliance as one of the democracies against autocracies while praising Prime Minister Narendra Modi.
And Prime Minister Modi, it's wonderful to see you again in person. Thank you for your continuing commitment to making sure democracies deliver, because that's what this is about, democracies versus autocracies, and we have to make sure we deliver.
Later, at the bilateral with Prime Minister Modi, Biden again raised the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
We also discussed the ongoing effects of Russia's brutal and unjustified invasion of Ukraine and the effect it has on the entire global world order. And the U.S. and India are going to continue consulting closely on how to mitigate these negative effects.
India, which is pursuing its own independent policy towards Russia, negotiated the minefield deftly, sticking to its real objective of safeguarding interests in the Indo-Pacific region.
हम दोनों ही देश के इंडो पैसिफिक क्षेत्र के बारे में भी समान नजरिया रखते हैं और न सिर्फ द्विपक्षीय स्तर पर बल्कि अन्य लाइक माइंडेड देशों के साथ अपने साझा मूल्यों और साझा हितों को सुरक्षित रखने के लिए काम कर रहे हैं.
The Quad joint statement reflected India's stand and avoiding naming Russia. It called for peaceful settlement of disputes without resorting to threat or use of force. The four nations reaffirmed their resolve to uphold the international rules-based order. The countries discussed the response to Ukraine war and its implications for the Indo-Pacific. The statement also denounced cross-border terrorism. The Quad meeting was overshadowed by a comment by President Biden, who on the eve of the talks seemed to commit to a military defense of Taiwan should the Chinese attack them.
That's a commitment we made. We are not, look, here's the situation. We agree with a one China policy. We signed on to it and all the attendant agreements made from there. But the idea that it can be taken by force, just taken by force, is just not appropriate. It will dislocate the entire region and be another action similar to what happened in Ukraine.
The Quad stresses that it is a strategic alliance and not a military tie-up, but China still fears that this could be a NATO-like grouping, but specifically for the Indo-Pacific region. Even while talks were on in Tokyo, Chinese and Russian fighter jets were flying close to Japan. So while the Quad may not have announced any sort of specific measures, it appears the message sure has hit home. Follow me, Saha, in Tokyo for India Today.
And Paulomi Saha joins me from Tokyo. I know it's late in the night, Paulomi. You've had a very long day, so I won't keep it very long. But what have been the atmospherics like at the meeting? We've heard their official statements, but behind the closed doors, have they specifically mentioned their concerns over both Russia and China behind closed doors? What are your sources telling you?
That's right, Rajdeep. They have, in fact, discussed both Russia and the conflict in Ukraine, as well as China and its growing belligerence in the Indo-Pacific region in detail during that meeting. Remember, yesterday itself, of course, they launched the US-led initiative, which is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, already trying to counter China and its economic presence in the Indo-Pacific region. India is already on board with it. Of course, the contours of the IPEF are yet to be known, but it is something that the officials and the bureaucrats are already pushing their pens over. But as far as the Quad Summit is concerned, again, the statement, of course, may not have mentioned either Russia or China, but it clearly expressed the sentiment on Russia. Of course, there seems to be some sort of a softening, if you may, in terms of the stance, because while the US categorically maintains, and it was in fact enunciated by the US President Joe Biden in his opening remarks as well, that Russia is the aggressor and Russia needs to be countered, and military aggression doesn't seem to be its only goal. It wants to obliterate Ukraine and its culture altogether. In the statement, of course, it read more like the way India has been balancing the act in terms of saying that we do not we do not support any sort of hostility or violence, and we do believe that dialogue and discussion is the only way forward. We do believe that the international order needs to be maintained, and that is by following international laws, including the UN Charter on China. Of course, again, without naming China, they did mention its growing maritime bullying activities in terms of trying to use coercive activities to try and counter other nations in the Indo-Pacific region. So clearly a very strong statement and a message that went out to China.
Okay, Paulomi Saha, you stay well. Late night there in Tokyo. Appreciate your joining us with all those details. Let's raise those big questions. Can the Quad really contain China? Has the rise of Quad or the emergence of Quad unnerved China in any way? Are Russia and China now coming closer together and forming a front? Joining me now, Navteej Sarna, former ambassador of India to the United States. Aingar Tangen is American-Chinese political and economic affairs based in Beijing. Richard Russo, senior advisor and Wadhwani chair in US-India policy studies, joins me from Washington. Appreciate all of you joining us. He's at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington, D.C. Navteej Sarna, to you first. What's your sense? There are two views emerging from the Quad. One is that it sent out a strong message to China and Russia. The other is that they've stopped short of naming these two countries, and therefore there is still concern as to just how far can the Quad actually go in reining in either China or Russia at the moment.
Thank you, Rajdeep. Thank you for having me on the show. I would tend to go with the first view because the second view is already accepted form. We've already reached a situation in which when India is part of statements, we don't really criticize Russia by name, and we go by the standard generic formulations regarding territorial integrity, sovereignty, humanitarian assistance. That is the common ground that can be agreed upon. And as far as China is concerned, Quad has never really openly put out that it is a gathering against China. You will notice the word inclusive comes everywhere. And the fact that anybody who really plays by the rules that these countries are sort of agreed upon with each other can theoretically join. So China has not been named in any statement, so I don't give much credence to the fact. There's a lot of shorthand about China there. There's a lot of proxy naming of China that is there in the statements. And that is being read by the Chinese as well. You would have seen Wang Yi's reactions, where they say these are small circles and they are the new Cold War, the Asian NATO, and all that sort of stuff. So I would tend to go with the first one, that this is a strong meeting. It's a strong messaging, particularly to China, I would say, because it is being held in the Indo-Pacific. Now, there was a fear that the United States would get so bogged down with Ukraine and Russia that they would lose interest in the Quad and in the Indo-Pacific. Now, this meeting has put that fear to rest, and there's a strong messaging on several things, a kind of taking forward the agenda of the Quad as a constructive agenda, as a positive agenda, and as something which is, giving it practical shape.
I'm going to come to the specifics of the Quad to you, Mr. Sarna, in a moment, but let Mr. Tangian respond to that. The fact that you're saying that China is the elephant in the room, let's be very clear. Even though they are not named, this alliance is broadly seen, certainly by the Chinese, Mr. Tangian, as being anti-China. Is that how it's perceived, particularly because of Mr. Joe Biden, the US President's statement yesterday that if Taiwan was to be attacked, the US would and Japan would intervene. How is that being seen in Beijing? Is this being seen as an anti-China alliance being forged?
Well, of course it has. I mean, that's one of the reasons I enjoyed my colleague. And he said that he was very dismissive, that, Wang Yi was claiming this was against China. And then in the second half of his answer, he said, obviously, this was aimed at China because it was held in the East. Yeah, of course, China is concerned, and justly so. I mean, the situation in Ukraine, from their perspective, was the U.S. knowingly pushed in and created Ukraine into a proxy state to create a war for PR purposes initially. Now they see that the Ukrainians are resisting, and they're saying, oh, gee, this works out well. And then obviously Beijing is concerned that they're going to try to do the same thing with Taiwan, especially in view of Biden's third slip of the tongue, which is always being walked back by his advisors, saying, oh, no, we've not departed from strategic ambiguity or anything like that. He just said it off the cuff. Well, he said it 3 times in as many months. At some point, you have to believe him.
So when you say that the Chinese are they concerned about it? Do they see the forging of the strengthening of Quad as an attempt specifically to contain China? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, they're obviously concerned if 4 of your people or 4 powerful countries get together and basically draw a bullseye on you. I think India would be concerned about something like that. Obviously, they have to do it. But when you start looking at what actually happened, most of it was a talk shop. They talked about $50 billion, a one-time investment into infrastructure and green and this. I didn't really identify how it was going to be raised or what projects would be funded. China, on the other hand, just through the Belt and Road Initiative, each year puts in about $60 billion. So, I mean, China sees this as kind of minor attempts to kind of convince nations that they're doing something. Go back to the ASEAN meeting in Washington. Biden promised $150 million for 10 nations to do all sorts of wonderful things. It was a slap in the face. They just didn't know what to make of it. Plus, he didn't even bother to have one-on-one meetings with these leaders who had come all the way to Washington. Unfortunately, Biden, he has a lot of rhetoric, most of it aimed at the domestic side, as his poll numbers flag, but it doesn't seem to be having a clear strategy.
Mr. Russo, you've heard 2 views there. What's your sense? Is this an Asian NATO in the making, as Navneet Sarna seems to suggest, or some analysts would seem to suggest, or do you believe it's a talk shop, as Mr. Tengian suggests, that really, at the end of the day, doesn't add up to much? What really is the Quad all about?
I'd say it's a talk shop today that hopes to evolve into something that will be a more defined and proactive security partnership in the future. But, these are 4 countries that don't have a long history, at least together, of working together. So they're starting on smaller things, which I think we'd all sort of agree. China's domination of global trade flows in areas like critical minerals, a lot of the infrastructure money that was discussed before, we've seen that used as a hook for, political leverage with a number of countries in the region. Although sometimes that money that China deploys is also used on commercial basis. But there are times when it's been used as a more of a hook for countries where they want to get deeper security ties themselves. So you see, the evolution from strategic issues, I think, so far that have been at the crux of strategic and commercial, critical minerals, therapies, and healthcare, things like that. But then this time you saw, I think, a new step in a different direction, using somewhat ambiguous language, but talking about, deepening cooperation on humanitarian disaster relief, saying civilian-led, but utilizing military assets when needed. And then second, I think the biggest announcement was this creation of this Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. This will become real the day they decide to press button here. We've got 4 information fusion centers tracking ship movements across the region, and the ability to get them to begin sharing information on an unclassified basis. That can start pretty soon. So you did see some elements, I think, in this that begin to move it away from simply being a talk shop and beginning to define. But it's young, so we'll see where it translates into in the future.
There's one view, as I said, which is the talk shop view, Navtej Sarna. The other view also is that, what really can this group do to contain China? India's had to deal with 4 Chinese aggressions in the last decade, 2013, 2014, 2017, 2020. Quad has been around. What has the Quad been really able to do? Can the Quad really send out a strong message to China? It couldn't send out a message, just like NATO. It couldn't eventually contain the Russian aggression in Ukraine. If the Chinese were to be the aggressor on territory, whether in Japan, whether in the Solomon Islands in the context of Australia, or dare I say in India, what can the Quad really do?
But Rajdeep, first, let me correct. At no stage did I say that this is an Asian NATO.
Right.
I said the Chinese seem to dismiss the Quad as
point taken. Yes.
As to what we can do, a lot of the caution, and India is the most cautious of the 4 countries, has been due to the fact that you don't want to push the Chinese beyond a point. What you're trying to do is to bring an alternative paradigm, an alternative economic paradigm, and increasingly an alternative technological paradigm available to the countries of the Indo-Pacific and to all of us, honestly, so that you can counter the Chinese aggression, quote unquote, and I don't mean it only in military terms, the Chinese aggression that is taking over country in terms of technological backbone and predatory economics and so on. And therefore, the military security aspect of this is an important part. For instance, India and US are increasingly comfortable exercising with each other. There is the AUKUS, which is partly overlapping the Quad, and so on. But that's not the only theme. And that is why a lot of others, India has been particularly conscious of underlining things like climate change, infrastructure, technology, the Quad fellowships, education, and so on, so that we don't turn it entirely into a military security kind of gathering. And the announcement at this meeting of the IPEF, even though it's very early days on
the economic framework.
The economic framework, it's very early days on that, but it shows that, yes, there is some sort of a plan to align policies to work together to provide these alternative paradigms.
It's interesting you're saying that, because at one level, Mr. Sarna, we are part of BRICS, where China is part of this coalition that we've forged, and we are part of Quad. You think both can be reconciled?
Well, so far so good, Rajdeep. And, India has the ability, I think, and the nimbleness to work its way through these organizations and through these multilateral bespoke forums, as I call them, in order to push its own self-interests. Obviously, this is not easy, because as you see, the 3 other countries of Quad are very critical of Russia, but we are not. And yet we have managed to reach a joint statement. So there must be something right we are doing.
Mr. Tengen, how do you see it? Where India at one level has this strong trade relationship with China, at another level seems to want to build some kind of a Indo-Pacific alliance that is aimed at containing China with the United States. Do you believe the two will be reconciled, can be reconciled? From a Chinese perspective?
No, I mean, there's a basic hypocrisy. I mean, and I caught a little bit in my my former colleague's statement, and he talked first about principles, about how important that is, and then he finished up with self-interest. I think at some point you have to reconcile those before you start talking about, threading the needle. We can do this, we can do that, but then clothing it in some sort of higher principles. That's something that the U.S. has done. They talk about the rule of law. But I don't think that the people in Afghanistan would agree with you, or Iraq, or Syria, or Yemen, or many other places, including Africa, South America, basically. The global South.
But Mr. Tengen, I'm sorry to intervene. I mean, Chinese expansionism is also a reality. Let's be clear. Chinese expansionism is also a reality. Why should we not have a free and open Indo-Pacific?
Okay, so at what point has China ever prevented any kind of traffic through the Indo-Pacific? This is a myth. The fact is that 40% of China's GDP depends on ships going through this Indo-Pacific region. Why would they cut it off? This is something the U.S. says it's possible. Yes, everything's possible, but it's not probable. Why would China commit suicide by ending the trade routes that bring raw materials to China and ship out finished goods to other nations? It's a trading nation. What you talk about in terms of this aggression is simply the fact that China is the #1 trade partner for 120 countries. That is not by coercion. That is simply by mutual benefit. So this idea that everyone likes to say that there's some sort of big plan that China wants to take over the world, it's not justified in history, and it's certainly not justified by the facts.
Mr. Russo, is that an exaggeration, a Washington exaggeration about the Chinese threat? The Chinese have in return turned out to suggest that the U.S. wants to make Asia-Pacific countries pawns in U.S. hegemony. Is the U.S. exaggerating the Chinese threat at Quad, or do you believe it's a real threat to the region?
Well, there's three domains where, the previous speaker clearly, is kind of ignoring the facts that everybody in India knows so well. India today has lost a couple hundred square miles of territory due to Chinese incursion. You see every day as well, and we've got satellite imagery showing aplenty, that Bhutan is slowly being engulfed. Nepal has faced a lot of the same kind of pressures. And across the South China Sea, when you see Chinese fishing boats turning off transponders, cutting off Philippines fishermen, China signing on for UNCLOS and ignoring a dispute, settling an island dispute with Philippines. So there are areas. I mean, it's not to say the United States foreign policy has been perfect throughout time in history, but to ignore, what we've got, satellite imagery, treaties to which China is bound, and ignored decisions and rulings. It's very laughable, I think, to say that there's been a perfect run from the Chinese side as well. So India looks at these things and says, we need help and protection. The fights that India sees happening in the South China Sea, the aggressive expansionism, the 9-dash line, the creation of artificial islands, the utilization of merchant marines to harass fishing vessels and cover islands of neighboring countries. This is all quite real. And India is concerned, of course, that you're going to see a lot of these same fights played out in the Indian Ocean in the future. And India has enjoyed a long history of being the dominant naval power there. But if China looks to move a carrier into there, friendly ports that they're helping to co-develop right now, partnerships are going to be important. And clearly the United States and Australia can be two terrific allies in that.
You go along with that, Mr. Sarna, that this is the first stage towards an eventual broader alliance, which will at least send a message to the Chinese when it comes to Chinese expansionism. Do you really see this as some kind of a deterrent alliance?
Well, it may not deter the Chinese, but you just can't lie down and take it. And I'm afraid the speaker who came after me and who said that India said that India is indulging in hypocrisy and said that China wants free trade and free movement. I'm sure he's heard of places like Habantota and Somalia and Gwadar and how much free trade is going to be allowed, and how much the trade and militarization of these ports and other ports is happening, and the creation of islands in the South and East China Sea, and so on and so forth. So this may not be a deterrent, but this is an important coming together of four countries which can actually formulate and project a different kind of leadership, a different kind of economic cooperation, and very important, something which, a free technological atmosphere, because technology is going to be crucial in the economic cooperation in the years to come. An alternative digital landscape has to be provided to these countries. Otherwise, we may all give up. That's all. So I think it's a tremendously important thing. It's moving very cautiously. It's growing slowly, bit by bit. And as long as the four countries are aligned in their broad perspectives, not in all details, and they are aligned towards what they see as the danger coming from China, I think we'll move together. Maybe in baby steps, but certainly forward.
Well, that really, in a sense, perhaps sums up the Quad. Baby steps being taken, but hopefully moving in the right direction to forge the kind of alliances that are needed in the 21st century. How Beijing will respond in the weeks and months ahead, we'll have to wait and see. But for now, to Mr. Russo, Mr. Tengen and Navteej Sarna, appreciate your joining me here on my top talking point tonight on what the Quad message really is. There was also that interesting photo op where the BJP leaders are claiming that India is the Vishwa Guru because Mr. Modi is standing right in front of the other leaders. We seem to have inheritors of Devkant Barua. That's the image. Remember, Devkant Barua said India is Indira and Indira is India. Now the BJP says Mr. Modi has proven to be Vishwa Guru with him standing there in front. I wonder how, though, the Americans will see that image being interpreted by the BJP's social media cell. Let's leave it for that. Let's turn to today's top political story. Punjab Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann sacking his health minister over charges of corruption barely weeks after the new government has taken over. Vijay Sangla, the man in the controversy, had allegedly asked for commission on tenders. Arvind Kejriwal says this is evidence that the AAP has a zero tolerance approach towards corruption. His critics are saying it shows how the AAP too is riddled with corruption. Where does the truth lie? Take a look.
A loyalist of 7 years, a state minister, an MLA with a medical background. The AAP leadership in Punjab and in Delhi has cracked down on one of its own. Chief Minister Bhagwant Mann has sacked his health minister Vijay Sangla. This comes after the Chief Minister received a recording of the Mansa MLA demanding shukrana for tender allotments and supplies from his department.
मेरे ध्यान च एक केस आया जिहदे विच मेरी सरकार दा एक मंत्री हर टेंडर चों ਜਾਂ उस महकमे नाल संबंधित खरीदो फरोख्त दे विचों 1% कमीशन मंगदा सी। जे मैं चाहुंदा तां इस केस नूं मैं दब सकदा सी। मैं उस मंत्री दे खिलाफ सख्त एक्शन ले रहे हैं, उन मंत्रिमंडल चों बर्खास्त कर रहे हैं।
AAP's political messaging resonated in Delhi. Party chief Arvind Kejriwal, who once fired one of his ministers in 2015 over a similar corruption video, was quick to make an example out of the tough measure against Sangla.
अपने हेल्थ मिनिस्टर को बर्खास्त कर दिया, उसके खिलाफ केस दर्ज करके उन्हें गिरफ्तार किया जा रहा है। किसी को इस भ्रष्टाचार का पता नहीं था, ना मीडिया को पता था, ना विपक्ष को पता था, किसी को नहीं पता था। मान साहब चाहते तो मंत्री से सेटिंग करके अपने लिए एक हिस्सा मांग सकते थे। भगवंत, हमें आपके ऊपर गर्व है, पूरे पंजाब को आपके ऊपर गर्व है, पूरे देश को आपके ऊपर गर्व है।
Now under arrest, Sangla contested election from the Mansa Assembly constituency and defeated Punjabi singer Sidhu Moosewala by a margin of more than 63,000 votes.
साडी सरकार तहे दिलों ईमानदार सरकार है। ਅਸੀਂ 1 ਰੁਪਏ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਹੇਰਾਫੇਰੀ ਬਰਦਾਸ਼ਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਰਾਂਗੇ। ਜਦੋਂ ਚੋਣ ਪ੍ਰਚਾਰ ਦੌਰਾਨ ਮੈਂ ਪਿੰਡਾਂ ਸ਼ਹਿਰਾਂ ਕਸਬਿਆਂ ਜਾਂਦਾ ਸੀ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੀਆਂ ਅੱਖਾਂ 'ਚੋਂ ਇੱਕ ਉਮੀਦ ਦੇਖਦਾ ਸੀ। ਲੋਕਾਂ ਦੇ ਚਿਹਰਿਆਂ ਤੋਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇੱਕ ਉਮੀਦ ਨਜ਼ਰ ਆਉਂਦੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਸ਼ਾਇਦ ਕੋਈ ਐਸਾ ਆਵੇਗਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਭ੍ਰਿਸ਼ਟਾਚਾਰ ਦੀ ਆ ਕਰਪਸ਼ਨ ਦੀ ਦਲਦਲ 'ਚੋਂ ਕੱਢ ਲੇਗਾ।
The opposition warns the public there's more to come from the AAP government so far as corruption is concerned.
ਇੱਥੇ ਨਹੀਂ ਰੁਕਣੀ, ਉਨੀ ਦੇਰ ਇਹ ਲੋਕਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਬੜਾ ਦੁੱਧ ਦਾਲ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਾਲਾ ਲੱਗੇਗਾ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੋ ਕਿ ਸਿਰਫ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਹੀ ਪਤਾ ਹੈ ਕੀ ਤੋਂ ਕਮਿਸ਼ਨ ਮੰਗਿਆ ਗਿਆ। ਇਹ ਵੀ ਤਾਂ ਤੀਜਾ ਬੰਦਾ ਕੋਈ ਹੋਏਗਾ, ਕੀ ਦੀ ਆਡੀਓ ਵੀਡੀਓ ਹੈ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਤਾਂ ਜਾਰੀ ਹੋਊਗੀ।
But Singla's sacking could also serve as a chip on the shoulder of a party seeking to enter the political theatre of Himachal Pradesh and Gujarat. Manjeet Sehgal for India Today.
So is the AAP really walking the talk on corruption? Is this scandal the tip of the iceberg? Is Commission Raj across the country one of the biggest threats in a way to good governance? Raghav Chadda, Aam Aadmi Party's dynamic young MP, joins me, and Adil Singh Boparai of the Congress joins me. I know you're all the way in Davos at the moment, Raghav, but you have an eye on Punjab. How are we to interpret this? Your critics will say this is a political stunt. They're already saying that of the Aam Aadmi Party, saying it only proves our claim that AAP is no different from others when it comes to corruption. On the other hand, Mr. Kejriwal says he had tears in his eyes when he heard of what action Bhagwant Mann has taken. Where's the truth?
So, Mr. Sardesai, first of all, it takes a bold and a courageous leader with unimpeachable integrity, filled with uprightness to take such a decision. No opposition had any whiff of it. Nobody in the media had any clue about it. One could have easily suppressed the evidence and the information. But the Aam Aadmi Party's government, Bhagwant Mann Saab's government, chose to sack its own minister, sitting minister, for seeking 1%. It's not about the percentage. It's not about 1% or 1 rupee. It is about the principle. And this demonstrates that as far as AAP is concerned, our administration is concerned, there is zero tolerance for corruption. In other parties, Mr. Sardesai, you see kickbacks. In our party, those seeking kickbacks are kicked out. In other parties, you see minister getting cuts. In our party, if a minister seeks cuts, that minister is cut off. In other parties, you see the prosecution sanctions being withheld by the government. In our section, we got our own police to arrest the minister and investigate the matter. So therefore, it is completely clear that Aam Aadmi Party, which has done this twice, first was Mr. Kejriwal's 2015, incident where he had sacked his own food and civil supplies minister because some evidence had come to fore, irrefutable evidence had come before us of him indulging in an act of corruption. This shows that we are here for providing a clean government, and I can say this. I come from the Aam Aadmi Party, and you may consider this as a political comment, but as an Indian, let me tell you today that I am proud that we have a political party in the form of Aam Aadmi Party and a leader in the form of Arvind Kejriwal and Bhagwant Mann Saab, who have zero tolerance towards corruption, who can say that, that our government is a corruption-free government. Now, opposition, of course, will attack us by saying that, you've been in government for a little over 60 days and, there is a corruption scandal, etc. Look, let me answer this with a straight bat right at the outset. We cannot guarantee that more than 1 crore members of the Aam Aadmi Party are people with unimpeachable integrity, or all 117 candidates in Punjab to whom we gave tickets are people who are completely above board. There could be minor lapses here or there, but what we can guarantee, Mr. Sardesai, is that if any person is seen to be indulging in an act of corruption, if there is any evidence that comes before us, we will not shy away. We will not think twice. We will not suppress the evidence. We will remove that person. You're
taking the moral high ground at the moment. Adil Singh Boparai, the AAP can take the moral high ground. They've actually sacked someone without even the charges being made public. If the charges had been made public and then they had sacked him, you could have argued that they were under public pressure or political pressure. They've actually sacked Mr. Singla even without any charges being officially, formally made by any institution or by the opposition. To that extent, they can claim they've set a unique precedent.
Well, Mr. Sardesai, the Aam Aadmi Party cannot make a virtue out of necessity. The Aam Aadmi Party is like the modern-day East India Company, which has come from Delhi to loot and plunder Punjab. And let me give you a fact, and this can be verified. Don't take my word on this. Ask your own team to verify this. An overwhelming number of the MLAs of the Aam Aadmi Party are history cheaters. They are facing charges ranging from cheating to land grabbing. This is the Aam Aadmi Party, notwithstanding their glib talk and holier-than-thou spiel. Now, the more important question is, if there is one thing which is consistent with Mr. Arvind Kejriwal, that is his penchant for drama and charade, right from his days of the Anna Hazare movement. This is nothing but a diversion, a deflection. The real money is being made by the Delhi imports. And I have no qualms in saying this. The real money which is being made by the Aam Aadmi Party is in the liquor and the sand mafia. And the Aam Aadmi Party and their supremo have sent a motley crew of Delhi imports, which is stationed in Chandigarh to plunder Punjab.
But why would they sack a minister who hasn't even had charges against him? They've sacked a minister even without any formal charges.
This is the beauty of that drama. You catch somebody with peanuts, but the real money which is being made by Delhi imports and liquor and sand trade is pushed under the carpet. But be that as it may, there is something more loud and eloquent about this drama, which is that the complete lack of administrative efficiency, gross mismanagement, and more importantly, lack of talent when it comes to the Aam Aadmi Party. This is a party which just does not have it in him to govern Punjab. What Punjab needs today is serious governance, Mr. Sardesai. We have a host of problems facing us. We do not need a Vigyapan Sarkar. And this is the perfect example of Mr. Kejriwal's textbook. He's been doing this in Delhi since 2015. He's been able to fool the people in Delhi for a long time. But let me assure you, Punjabis are much smarter. They can see through all this charade. And sooner than later, they will give a resounding.
You have evidence that they are involved with the liquor and sand mafia, Mr. Boparai?
Well, give it some time. Give it a few days and weeks. The skeletons will tumble.
Let Raghav Chadda,
and the Delhi imports. Let me say one thing. Let me say one more thing. The Delhi imports have their hands in the cookie jar.
Delhi imports, are you referring to my friend Raghav Chadda? You're also my friend Adil Singh Boparai. Are you referring to my other friend here, Raghav Chadda? Raghav Chadda, you want to respond? Delhi imports are involved. They have their hands in the till in Punjab. This is a drama to take away attention from core issues like taking on the sand mafia or taking on the various other mafias that operate in Punjab over the last decade and more.
Mr. Sardesai, I don't even wish to dignify the slanderous comments made by the spokesperson of the Congress. I was given to understand that he's a lawyer, but clearly he's forgotten law and he's making absolutely baseless, defamatory, slanderous comments against my party leadership without any iota of evidence. I will not even dignify that with a response. I'll move on with the conversation. But let me tell you, no, of course, we'll decide our legal strategy separately. But as far as the state of Punjab is concerned, as he said, Punjabis are smart. They are smarter, and they saw through the Congress. You have two types of governance models that the state of Punjab has seen in less than 6 months. One, where a new administration sacks its own minister because irrefutable evidence of him indulging in an act of corruption come to the fore. On the other hand, you had the Congress regime, where Congress's own chief minister, Charanjit Singh Channi's nephew, was caught, was raided, and more than 10 crore rupees of cash was found at his residence. Several crores of properties and luxury cars, etc., were found in his residence, etc. So you have two models before you. You have the Congress model, where chief minister and his relatives are caught red-handed with piles and piles of cash, and the other model where a minister was seeking merely 1% in the contract amount and he has been sacked, unceremoniously removed. It is for the people of India to decide which model do they want.
1% can also be a lot of money. Let's not constantly focus. 1% also is a lot of money. The fact is that the commission Raj, as I said, Raghav, has existed in states like Punjab for the longest time. Are you saying that today what you've done with Vijay Sangla, you will do with others also in the future? If any evidence is provided in the future, AAP will act. Is that the assurance you're giving me?
AAP has acted. AAP will act. AAP is acting. And you out of all the people know that when it comes to corruption, Aam Aadmi Party has zero tolerance. And, it's a bit rich coming from the Congress that has looted the state of Punjab. Every single legislator of the Congress party has been alleged to be in indulging in acts of corruption, neck deep in the liquor business, in the sand mafia business, in the transfer posting racket. In fact, I had raided an illegal mining site. I had myself raided an illegal mining site in the chief minister's own constituency. I'm given to understand even you went to the chief minister's constituency and found that how illegal sand mining was going on in Charanjit Singh Channi's own assembly constituency. It's shocking. And it's a bit rich that the Congress today is passing these sweet sermons.
Adil Singh Bopra,
acts of corruption.
Fair enough. Let me give the fine.
It's mind-boggling.
You're in power for the last 60 days. So who knows what happens a year, 2 years down the line. But Adil Singh Bopra, the fact is that both the Akalis and Congress on corruption in Punjab cannot take the moral high ground, because your governments was charged with far more serious charges of corruption and nothing was done. At least here, whatever it is, whatever the motive, whether drama, a minister has been acted against. You give me examples where even without the evidence being brought out in the public domain, a minister has been acted against by the Congress or the Akalis or indeed any government in this country. Today in the BJP ruled state of Karnataka, contractors are making allegations of 40% commission, but no one is touched.
May I respond?
Yes,
Mr.
very quickly.
Sardesai, I again reiterate my preliminary point. The Aam Aadmi Party cannot make a virtue out of necessity. How does Mr. Chadda know that nobody else got the whiff of this scam or nobody else got the whiff of this tender scam? But be that as it may, now let's look at facts. Is this not a matter of fact that an overwhelming number of the Aam Aadmi Party legislators are facing serious allegations of cheating and other infractions under the Indian Penal Code? Number 2. Number 3, health is such a critical portfolio. There is no antecedent check under the Aam Aadmi Party. There is a dearth of quality leadership in the Aam Aadmi Party. And the problem is that the Aam Aadmi Party, right from the word go, right from the point they started, is adept at drama. This is nothing but drama and a well-orchestrated strategy to appear holier than thou.
Okay.
And I again reiterate,
Mr. Sardesai,
let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. Whether the AAP is playing holier than thou will be tested in the months and years ahead. It's just 60 days in power in Punjab, but clearly the optics
Mr.
of
Sardesai,
sacking a minister. Yeah, very quickly, Raghav, all the way from Devos, 30 seconds.
One sentence. Aam Aadmi Party has been in existence for less than a decade. Congress has been in existence for more than a century. Can you, in a more than a century tenure of the Congress Party, point out one incident where the Congress has sacked their own, whether it's a MLA or a minister, on grounds of corruption? Okay. One example. Okay. In more than a century's existence of the Congress Party. The answer is you can't, because they don't act on corruption.
Okay, you've made your point, Raghav Chadda. We'll wait and see whether the AAP acts on all instances of corruption in Punjab or whether this is a one-off. And Adil Singh Bopra, you can perhaps go back and read up the history of Congress and tell me when did the Congress act against a minister who was not charged in the public domain but yet was sacked. For that,
well, the unfortunate reality with the Aam Aadmi Party is that they suffer from selective amnesia. I'm not here to educate Mr. Chadda, but perhaps he should just brush up his general knowledge.
One incident.
Okay, let's leave it there. Let's leave it there. Raghav Chadda, Adil Singh Bopra, good to have two young voices, sharp, joining me on the show tonight. Thanks very much for joining me on my talking point. Let's take a break on that point. When we return, our continuing coverage of the real issue of water emergency that's facing large parts of India. Today's report will come from Sihor in Madhya Pradesh. You're watching the news today. News without the noise.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com or call 9999892171.
Wastage is not just a social problem, but an environmental one too. It is important to take concrete steps to ensure food wastage is avoided at all costs. Why we shouldn't waste food? When we waste food, we waste the labor, the effort, investment, and precious resources. It also increases greenhouse gas emissions and contributes to climate change. What you can do? Reduce. Be more mindful of food you buy what you use, and use it all. Improve food storage and reduce wastage at home. Reuse. If you don't eat everything you make, freeze it for later. Use the leftovers as an ingredient in another meal. Recycle. Recycle as much as possible. Try composting and put nutrients back into the soil. You can also start your own green patch of fruits, vegetables, or herbs. With these easy ways, you can reduce food wastage and become a food hero.
You are.
Welcome back. Let's return today to our special series, Water Emergency, where we are bringing you stories how in this summer months there is a drinking water shortage in several parts of the country. Today's story comes from Sihor in Madhya Pradesh, where people in the village of Chanderi have run out of water as the wells dry out. Here's tonight's Get Real India report.
This pool is the only source of water for people of Chanderi village in Madhya Pradesh's Sihor district. As river Triveni dried up in the scorching heat wave, the villagers dug up the riverbed and managed to find water. Braving the heat, men and women from Chanderi come here every day to fill up their share of water.
हमने झीरी खोदे 1 महीने पहले से।
1 महीने पहले?
हाँ, और है तो हमारा बोर चल रहा है ना, गवर्नमेंट चल रहा है, कुछ भी नहीं चल रहा है। झीरी से ले जाते हैं पानी और इसे हम पीते हैं और हमारे ढोरमाल से पिवाते हैं।
ये जो आप भर के ले जा रहे हो, ये कब तक चलेगा?
जो पानी क्या चले, ढोरमाल में से पिया हमारा खाली हो जाएगा, अभी और फिर से आएंगे भरने।
जनवरी के महीने तक पानी फुल रहता है, नदी में पानी रहता है तब तक। और अगर अभी बंदा यहाँ पे ये बांध में पानी रहता है तो गांव के पूरे हेडपम्प पूरे चलते हैं, पानी की कोई कमी नहीं रहेगी।
अच्छा, अब ये कब टूटा ये बांध?
ये बांध 2018 में टूटा है।
हर साल ही हो है, ये बंधान सूखे और ये बंधान बनना चाहिए। हम सब बोर में, नदी में, सब में पानी नहीं थम नहीं रहे, ये बंधान सूख जाए तो।
The villagers claim wells in Chanderi have dried up. The 5 hand pumps in the village, they say, do not provide adequate water.
चंदेरी जाते हैं कुछ लोग झीरी जाते हैं। हाँ। तो ऐसा क्यों है कि मतलब बाकी जो हैंडपंप भी है यहाँ पे?
साहब हैंडपंप में भी पानी नहीं है, कहाँ है पानी? हैंडपंप से पूर्ति नहीं हो रही जब तो भागते हैं वहाँ।
आप लोग बस ये कुएं और बोरवेल जो हैंडपंप है,
हाँ बस इससे ही निर्भर है।
Trouble started for people of Chanderi when a small dam built on Triveni gave way in 2018.
ये अंग्रेजों के ज़माना का बांध है और अभी 2018 में टूट गया है। जब से ये बंधा नहीं है, अगर ये गांव बंधान बनता है तो पानी की मतलब मेरी पुरानी चंदेरी तो होगी, पानी मिलेगा ही मिलेगा। मैं इससे आधा दर्जन गांव को पानी मिलेगा, सीहोर शहर को भी पानी मिलेगा। इसकी मांग तो 10 साल से करते आ रहे सिंचाई के लिए किसानों ने, वो भी सरकार ने नहीं करी। उसके बाद अभी 3-4 साल से पुरानी चंदेरी के 6 गाँव के लोग कई बार विधायक जी से बोला कि बंधान बंधा दो, लेकिन अभी तक नहीं बंधा है। कोई सुनने वाला नहीं, सिर्फ वोट पे जाते, लालच दे देते थोड़ा बहुत। तो अब ये है कि सर हो सकता है इस बंधान को बंधा दे सरकार, यही अनुरोध है सर।
Right now the options for the villagers are limited. They're hoping for relief with the monsoon, which is slated to hit the state by June 15th. With Ravish Pal Singh in Sihor, Bureau Report, India Today.
Ravish Pal Singh reporting on the real issues that really matter. Today's good news story comes from a village in Uttar Pradesh, where a 64-year-old Sheila Devi has taken up the role of a hand pump mechanic. That's right. She's made it her mission to repair hand pumps so that people in her village have a steady supply of water. Take a look.
Hand pumps that run dry, a common sight in villages. Sheila Devi from Nanda village in UP's Mahoba district has made it her mission to fix hand pumps so that people in her village never run out of water.
पानी की परेशानी महिलाओं को ज़्यादा पड़ती है, क्योंकि पानी महिला ही भरती है, पुरुष तो कभी नहीं जाते हैं, ना उनको इतना पानी लगना है। अगर बर्तन साफ करना है तो महिला को करना है, कपड़े साफ करना है तो महिला को करना है, खाना बनाना है तो महिला को बनाना है। इसलिए महिलाओं को बहुत पानी की दिक्कत होती थी। तो हम सभी महिलाओं ने ये काम किया और हम मतलब गांव-गांव जाते थे और हैंडपंप सुधारते थे।
The 64-year-old has repaired at least 500 hand pumps in her village with her own hands. Not just that, Sheila has taken it upon herself to teach young women in her village how to ride a bicycle.
अब तक मैंने कम से कम नहीं तो 35-40 लड़कियों को यहाँ भी सिखाई, और जैसे बरा है, बसौरा है, वहाँ पर भी मैंने लड़कियों को हिम्मत बंधवाई और उनको श्रीनगर पढ़ने के लिए भेजा। कोई सिजहरी जाने लगी, कोई महोबा जाने लगी, तो ऐसी काफ़ी लड़कियाँ हमारे यहाँ से पढ़ने लगी।
All this fame did not come without its fair share of struggle. Sheila became a widow at a young age and was forced to work as a laborer to raise her son. Today, she's an inspiration for women in her village. With Nahid Ansari in Hamirpur, Bureau Report, India Today.
Lovely, good news story there. Another heartwarming story comes from Madhya Pradesh as my image tonight, where a beggar bought a moped for his wife who complained of a backache. Santosh Kumar Sahu earlier had a tricycle, but after his wife Munni said she had been facing backaches, he bought 90,000 rupees to buy her a moped. Love can do strange things. Love and genuine affection. Let's leave it there. You stay well, stay safe. Good night. Shubhratri, Jai Hind, Namaskar.
History is at a turning point, from the war in Ukraine to the climate and food crisis. From the much-wanted metaverse to unstable cryptocurrencies, get a ringside view to the ideas and challenges that are shaping the post-pandemic world. Catch me all through this week on India Today and Business Today as I bring you all the latest from a World Economic Forum that's being held this time in summer in Davos.
Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Make your media plan smarter with India Today Live TV on your connected devices. Amplify your brand with 100 million smart internet viewers. To advertise, mail us at sales@aajtak.com or call 9999892171.
You are watching India Today.
Why does PM Modi prefer to travel at night during any foreign visit? While Modi visits Japan to attend the Quad Summit in Tokyo, he follows the same travel pattern he does. One of